Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is Jonas. Report is for the 21st of February. No surprise, we were looking at weakness that was building up intraday reading wise, and it fell modestly right down to the 76%. What it more importantly did was it filled a positive extreme on the 50K that we had been looking at for a while and cleared that out. And then, of course, buyers came back into it. So it's just one of those little rinse and repeats. It was just enough short interest to push up above. But now, potentially, you face a more pressing issue. We've got Magenta. We're almost dipping below 33 when that does. If MBI White had continued higher, then we would be a little bit more concerned about the situation. But we're still just crossing straight up, within this resistance line. No real change. And that's just because it just lacks direction at this particular stage. You have some things happening within the Doge. You still don't have a cabinet that's completely confirmed, though that's closer now than it was. And the courts are still blocking a lot of stuff. So nothing's really changing from that standpoint. From an NQ standpoint, we expected it to be a little weaker. And in fact, it did do that. So it gave a little bit more back, and it still finished about 76%. Hardly anything to, freak out about, though. We will be watching that shakeout because now that it's, back to negative histogram, we could see some continued back and forth within the overall range, but it does pose a risk because if you drop below the previous levels, you could end up with a much more significant pullback. So we'll keep watching it. You got to have the NBI White rising, though, on that daily for it to really impact. And we're going to see it on the intraday anyway. So it'll be pretty much even, be able to see it early. From a TLT standpoint, the Treasury's just not going to go anywhere. There's just nothing happening there. You got no choice but to be in the market at this particular stage. And that's going to be a little bit sketchy because you're going to have this movement, so to speak, that's really not going much of anywhere. And that's just because it really can't until there's some kind of clarity as to what's taking place with oil still being too high. Can't happen. That's a broken record, I know. The interesting one, Euro getting some surprise bonus here. Somehow they think that all that extra military spending that they're going to do with more debt is a bonus to the Euro. Interesting thinking, but it caught some people excited and they're very happy with the idea. So yeah, doesn't change the fundamental disconnect between how European nations are all looking at big red numbers for all of their economies. But then I guess they figured the U.S. is worse, so not a problem. Gold just holding on. It had made new highs, and it will continue. Still keeps attacking towards that 3K number. It's a heavy psychological resistance right there, but this allows for Bitcoin and them to catch up to the fact that gold has continued its run while the others have sort of been parked in a malaise, and you can see Bitcoin made a little bit of a move, and that's consistent with what we see in the reading here with Magenta leading, but it's still not a whole lot of excitement within that. We're going to start seeing some real numbers coming from the economy, and what those are going to be, I think, is anybody's guess at this particular stage. But from a practical standpoint, you can imagine that the revisions are going to be significant, and what that means as far as how they're going to treat it, that really becomes the interesting one, because they've been relying on fluffed up phony data, and the fact that you continue to see federal workers being laid off, fired, whatever you want to call it, combined with potential cuts, though we really haven't seen, you'd hear these numbers talked about. It doesn't mean that the government still isn't spending record amount of money. So before you get too excited by those things, you have to balance it with reality. Now, this is what we were talking about before, so this is why we talk about positive extremes. So we had this one all the way down here in the extreme histogram, and we talked about how the previous one had filled, from right in this range a couple of days ago, but that it left this primary untouched. And then we had the MBI White spike here where Magenta was still leading. So that was all a counter move on that part. But then once it broke down and you saw MBI White took over, that was when it really escalated, because it took over at a point where you were below the 50% mark. We were looking for a move back to 50% or towards the zero that was rising. But once that weakness was exposed at a break of that significant level, and it continued, and you ended up with a move to zero, and then you ended up with magenta back over. And once the magenta got back over, you see that seesaw effect, and it's just a question of when MBI white fails below, and then you know that it's off to the push back up. And of course, MBI white has been leading along this with the magenta over, and that's usually a forced short cover when that takes place. And in fact, that's kind of exactly what it did. However, we'll see who drops faster, MBI white or magenta on this turnaround move, because that's quite extended for only getting to the 50%, which means I think you're likely to see another leg lower before things solidify. It's just a little tough. It can proceed along there, but you'd have to have an awful lot of funds roll in there to counter short interest on that one, and that could be a little bit tough. We'll see. There are times where shorts just stop completely, and we see that when you get these massive drops in the MBI white. But if it doesn't break down like that, then usually you end up with that short pressure that kind of drives things. This is what it looked like in the pre-market, just as the open happened. It drove it all the way down. And once all those extra put buyers came in there, that gave opportunity for call buying to counter it. And sure enough, they negated them pretty quick. So that is exactly how that option environment works, and it worked beautifully. So now you're in with the week where everyone's been neutralized, and they can begin to set up for next week. So that's just the cycle of the game, and just keep playing with it. So all in all, good stuff. Anything relevant, though, I will put it on the Skype chat for you. We'll just continue to follow the readings. Have a good one. Trade well.